I'm Dr. Rose Wallis, Associate Professor of British Social History at the University of the West of England. Together with Sheila Hannon, creative producer for Show of Strength Theatre Company, and actor Lynda Rooke, we have worked with women at Eastwood Park Prison to recover and reimagine the overlooked but extraordinary lives of 10 working women who were incarcerated on this very spot at Bristol Newgate Prison in 1817. It's perhaps hard to imagine, but where the Galleries shopping centre stands now, Bristol Newgate once stood. Rebuilt in 1690, there had been a prison on this site from the medieval period. This was not like modern prisons, where inmates served out their sentences in separate cells under a strict regime. Here, prisoners were held together, men, women and children, in overcrowded and damp communal cells, some awaiting trial and others awaiting punishment. By the time our Bristol women were incarcerated here in 1817, conditions were notoriously bad. The prisoners described as filthy in the extreme, often sick, living in utmost misery. Owing to its ruinous state, Newgate was closed in 1820, replaced by Bristol New Jail. Like most people prosecuted in the early 19th century, and indeed now, our women were young working people. Aged between 20 and 27, they had been servants, market traders and lace makers. It's hard to discern motive, but they had to navigate seasonal or precarious employment, supporting themselves and their families, like many working people at the time, making use of both legitimate and illegitimate means to make ends meet. Convicted of property crimes, 7 were charged with theft and 3 with receiving stolen goods. Some hailed from Bristol, while others had travelled here from places like Birmingham and Leicestershire. Some were unmarried, others separated from family. One was widowed at 24, and one took her child with her on what would be an extraordinary journey. While there is little of our women's voices in the surviving archival material, we can, for some of them, catch a glimpse of their agency where they made choices and pushed back. The 3 women charged with receiving stolen goods had all moved to Bedminster and were brought to the attention of the authorities by a series of thefts perpetrated by the men they lived with. All 3 women refused to sign their statements or admit the charges against them. One even told the magistrates it was of no use to question her and she would abide by the consequences. I've rarely encountered a woman making, or rather not making, such a strong statement. All 10 of the women we looked at were sentenced to be transported to penal colonies in Australia, some for 7 years and the Bedminster women for 14 years each. Together, aboard the Friendship, they made an arduous 6-month journey. The conditions on the ship were dire. There was little water and the crew apparently had unhindered access to the female convicts. No doubt to counter accusations of the crew's misconduct, the women aboard were blamed, labelled by the ship's surgeon as prostitutes and leaders of the mutinous spirit. The reputation of convict women meant it was easy for certain assumptions to be made about their characters and any choices they had made or were forced to make on the voyage. All the Bristol women were put to work on their arrival, often navigating the same issues of employment and insecurity they had experienced back home. But some managed to dramatically alter their lives in Australia. 2 of our Bedminster women became substantial property owners, even visiting England some 20 years later before returning to their estates on the other side of the world. Using historic material from Bristol museums and archives and collections in Australia, women at Eastwood Park Prison have reimagined the lived experience of these 10 women from Bristol Newgate. Prison confidentiality means we cannot individually credit our writers, but they've provided powerful insights in their dramatic retellings of these historic stories. Along with contributions from Sheila, Lynda and I, their words are performed by Rachael Fagan, Gerard Cooke, Lynda Rooke and Sheila Hannon, with audio and video recordings directed by Andy Hay. This project was made possible by funding from Historic England and the Regional History Centre at UWE and with the support of HMP Eastwood Park and the Galleries Shopping Centre. All the writers interpreted the material as they wished, so names and stories vary, but the scripts came together quite organically forming a narrative that spans these historic women's experiences. Listen and imagine what it was like to make this journey from Bristol to Botany Bay.
Do you know what it's like, working in such a beautiful place when all the loveliness has vanished for you? Well, that's what work has become for me. The once beautifully bright candelabras, silver and magnificent, hanging in the doorway, always welcoming you in from the cold. Welcoming them, I should say. When I arrive to work at 5 a.m. to light them, the hallway is freezing. And yet when Mr. and Mrs. wake up at 7:30, it welcomes them. Bright lights guiding them downstairs, a comfortable warmth protecting them from the outside frost. It's hardly fair. How some get so much in life, and others so little. Especially when it's handed to them. Because if you're born rich, you die rich. And if you're born poor, well, you die poor. The thoughts come to me easily. Did I not work with and for those with wealth daily? Did I not serve in a house with treasures and riches? Well, it shouldn't be so hard. I am barely noticed in this large house, and how they would notice if I wasn't here to light the fires and fetch their clothes, to serve the food someone else makes for them, and tidy the beds and rooms another cleans for them. Certainly pleases me to think of their reactions if I were to not turn up one day. The mistress can't even lace her own dress. But as the root of all things, money. They may not pay me a lot, but pay me they do. And when I came to thinking with a seriousness of how to dare my luck, I decided simplicity was best. If I were the one dressing my mistress, would she notice clothes missing? I could simply not choose certain things. She may never know it's missing.
No, I don't want to see him. I never want to see any of them again as long as I live. Keep them here in Newgate and transport them for life so Bedminster's shot of them for good. I lives next door, God help me. And Colston Street was respectable till they arrived. The minute I set eyes on them, I knew there was trouble. The two sisters came first, Sophia and Lucy. You do know they're sisters, don't you? Not from Bristol. Sound more like up north. Birmingham, maybe? The other one arrives a week later. Sarah, she's called. She's not from round here either. Flashy clothes, all three of them. I've never seen her work, or nothing respectable. Then the look, and the noise started. Mr. Jack, the girls call him. Middle of the night it was, and the shouting and banging woke half the street, and screaming. My wife's a sick woman. Then the party started. Coming and going, all hours. Next thing, they're renting another house opposite, and there's more blokes. Can't tell who lives here now and who's just coming and going. In and out, all hours, like a fiddler's elbow. Thick as thieves they are, if you know what I mean. And the carrigan's on. Immoral, as well as illegal. There's a child too. A little girl. No idea who she is. Looks about 5. Nice little thing, but she won't tell you her name, and that says something. But it's the men that's the problem. Did Mr. Jack tell you his name was John Johnson? Well, it's not. It's Andrew Wood. And he's escaped from Liverpool jail after being sentenced to transportation for life. On the run to his friends down here. That's why he turned up in the middle of the night. How do I know? Because the walls, paper thin, and if you put a glass against it and listen, you can hear a lot. They brought a gold watch back this morning, stolen from a jeweller off Broad Street. And they've been robbing coaches when they pause to change horses. The men do the robbing, and the girls get rid of the stuff later. If you want a statement, I'll be delighted to give them. They're a bad lot, and I want them out of Bedminster and off to Botany Bay as soon as possible. Yeah, that's helpful.
When you're put on the spot, you either have to know how to improvise and tell a good story, or plead ignorance. I'm hoping people will believe the latter. Oh, I am just a woman, after all. Surely these fine gentlemen can't believe I'm capable of being the mastermind of a criminal operation. True, I've done nothing worse than turn a blind eye. Well, who alive in this world wouldn't do or say anything to protect a loved one? And if I'm found to be lying, I can say I was motivated by love. Anyway, Lucy has done nothing but look after me since my Jay died, despite being in hardship herself. It's what sisters do for each other. And how can they prove where the ribbons came from when it's such a common item? They could have bought them from any source, any place in good faith. The men, on the other hand, were stupid, thinking they could steal a highly valuable, rare item, then hiding it in plain sight of a witness and thinking it wouldn't be found by anyone. Oh, the mind boggles. Thing is, they thought they were being smart. Then they tried to return to the house. Well, now, because of their recklessness, we may be the ones to be punished for it. Thinking about themselves, as usual. They didn't even consult us. If only we hadn't needed to rely on them for the rent. You see, lace making is tough because there's so much competition. One of the limited skills girls are taught, so there are a lot of us. Of course, they also teach us cooking and cleaning, sewing, haberdashery. Oh, all for husbands and eventually children's benefit. But no one teaches you what happens when you lose your reason for living and who your whole life revolves around. My security and my comfort have been snatched away from me, and cruelly. I tried to make an honest living. Didn't turn out that way.
The worst thing about Bristol Newgate is the draughts. It chills my bones. I haven't the energy to keep lifting my hands and rubbing myself. I've nothing left on me to bribe the jailer. And the worst hell is needing to sleep, but can't. Sleep deprivation makes pain 10 times worse. I haven't even a scrap of cloth to push in between my bare skin and freezing cold metal of the ankle chain. The reason why I'm in prison. I took a gamble and lost. I was stupid enough to be optimistic and think that I could change my fate for the better. It's strange how once you've passed the sickly, dizzy pain of hunger, you get used to it. And you can do without. Water, though. Oh, water for my throat. I can't do without. I'm a newcomer and haven't really spoken to anyone yet, or rather they haven't spoken to me yet. The constant noise keeps me alert. I hear the creaking and the cranking of chains and doors slamming and echoing and, constant coughing. The poor infants resting on their mothers' breasts and bellies, piteously moaning. Those who are still breastfeeding, I wonder if their milk will dry up soon. If I had anything to spare, I'd willingly offer it. All we can try to do is huddle together for warmth. I'm at the end of the row, nearest the corner. I guess I'm easy to overlook because I'm quiet. Mind you, I have a tendency to trust the wrong people. All I can smell and breathe is the stench of dead bodies. I had to go to a mortuary once and I never thought I'd reenact the experience. I have nothing in my body to vomit out. All I can do is keep still as much as possible. Oh, and try not to wet myself. Because trying to attract the attention of a jailer to get a bucket, it's next to impossible. Maybe when I get desperate enough, I'll ask a fellow prisoner if they know someone who's hiding one, and I can pass it down the line to me. It's embarrassing having to ask, though. Although most women are happy to help you out in situations such as these. We're all in the same boat here. I know I made a stupid mistake, but I am still a person. I did it out of desperation, not malice. I don't know how much more I can take. I have nothing left. I've been estranged from my children, my very reason for living. I know they are better off with their father. And I hope that one day they can forgive me. I know that it is a sin to think this, but I feel like death would be a relief. And hopefully Heavenly Father will have mercy on me. I know it is not for me to question the grand plan. I'm at the bottom of the pile, and there I will remain. I must stay humble and hope someone superior takes pity on me.
Dear Mother, I will pray each day that you receive this letter to know that I am safe and for your worries to be no more. I say my gratitudes every morning that you taught me to read and write. I have loving memories of us sitting by the tiny fire, desperately trying to stay warm, the wood crackling loudly, and you, my dear beloved mother, teaching me to read and write with the only book you owned.
I left Yo with a heavy heart, but I had no choice. Lance found out that Lucy was not his child and would have killed me if I had not run. In Bristol, I found a job as a servant to a lovely family. Hard work and long hours, but they were kind, and most days I could take my little girl with me. I lived in Bedminster in Colston Street, where I met two lovely neighbours, Lucy and Sophia, sisters they were, and we quickly became friends. When I struggled to meet the rent, Lucy and Sophia introduced me to two of their friends who needed accommodation, John and William. Can you believe it, Mother? They were from near Birmingham, so I could pay the rent and help my fellow countrymen. Thing is, Mother, I didn't know that they were all small-time thieves, and I were arrested for their wrong deeds. The police believed I was involved in all the criminal activity, and I was charged with receiving stolen goods from tow stagecoaches, ribbons and workboxes. I was found guilty of receiving only the ribbons, but they gave me the maximum sentence, 14 years transportation to Botany Bay. I spent 6 months in Bristol Newgate Prison, and now nearly 7 months on this dreadful ship. Neither are fit for pigs to live in, and those who run them not fit to live with those same pigs. Enough said, Mother. I thank the Lord every day that my beautiful little girl has been with me all this time. It's no life for her, I know, but she has my love and protection, just as I had from you when I was a small child. Our captain says we arrive in 2 days' time, and I am to be a servant for a wealthy family and keep my child. Mother, I do believe God has a plan for me, and that something wonderful will come from this dreadful experience. I'm going to become someone in life, and abundant in all aspects of life. And as soon as I can, I will send for you, and then we three will be a loving family once again. But if God's plan is not to involve us meeting again on this side, I promise you, Mother, and I know this truly in my heart, that we will meet again on the beautiful shore they call paradise. Your loving daughter, Sarah Knight.
Do I miss him? Not particularly. I've been married to George Perkins for 4 years, and it certainly wasn't a marriage made in heaven. Too many times he'd been too handy with his fist. But that never stopped me getting my own back. After one unpleasant session, I locked him in the outside midden. He spent the night there, and it was February. So he wasn't in a position to argue the next morning. He was frozen solid. That'll teach him. When Sir Robert Vaughan Knight sent me down for 7 years to Botany Bay, my first reaction was, well, good riddance, George Perkins. You'll have to find somebody else for a punch bag and a general dog's body. I took the 2 children. Well, of course I did. Mary Jane was 3 and Thomas 18 months. Well, I thought, maybe we can start a new life. Well, it can't be any worse than here. Stepping onto that ship, the Friendship, I was terrified. I'd never been on a ship before, though I'd known a few sailors in my time. The 2 little ones were clinging on to my skirts, and the man who helped me aboard could see I was still chained. He had a ruddy face, and he gave me a wink as I hitched up my skirts to scramble off the gangplank. It was when he gave me a larger chunk of bread than the others that I knew my luck was in. And that was just the start. Biscuits and rum. Well, it made the nights more pleasant. And why not, eh? I got to know Francis very well on that journey, for that was his name. Well, the name he told me. I mean, he could have been Blackbeard's grandson for all I knew. But I trusted him. And looking back, I think that's how we three survived. The children were very badly seasick as we rounded the Cape of Good Hope in some very bad storms. And as we crossed the Indian Ocean, I seriously thought their days were numbered. And then suddenly, the weather calmed. And we entered the doldrums without a breath of breeze. The heat, it was intense. And I spent most of my days down below. Sometimes when it was quiet, I'd be with Francis. And I found out he was originally from Dublin, but life and escaping the justices had brought him to England. Of course, some frowned on the friendship, like Mr. John Giles, who was a dour missionary with his head in the Bible most of the time. If you cannot behave as an honourable woman, then at least hand your children over to someone who will. But I am honourable, sir, I said. I am looking after my children and surviving by being skillful with the crew. I mean, this ship is called the Friendship, after all. And then there was Peter Cosgrave, the surgeon. He inspected us once when I was laughing and joking with Sophia and Lucy, the sisters. I was singing a song about not catching the clap called Don't Share Your Sponge. And I was just starting the second verse. Check his balls first, when Cosgrave came in the hold. Oh, you should have seen his face when I suggested checking his. Purple with rage it was. Vile prostitutes, the lot of you. Your rations will be cut for 48 hours. That'll teach you. I shouted, I'll see you hang for this, you evil, heartless so-and-so. And you should have seen this letter to Commander Armett when we finally landed after 6 months, plotting to cover their own negligence. That's what it was.
Armett, I would like to thank you for your note this morning, but I cannot forego admitting that I am incensed. How an upstart whelp like that missionary Giles could cast such aspersions against gentlemen of our standing beggars belief, all to curry favour with that righteous prig, the very Reverend Marsden. But you are right. We must act, and act now, to dissuade all the truth of their claims. To this end we must only look to the Bristol girls, if we can call them such, their language disgusting even to profligate men, their open and shameless vices, their fierce and untamable audacity will be their undoing, and our salvation. It will be a simple step to convince the governor that they are the most degraded and wanton whores, and for the reports to be proven, we will call upon the crew, who are no doubt anxious for their indecent conduct to go unscrutinised. I have styled the whore Perkins and the receivers, Sophia Richards and her bitch sister Lucy Myers, as the leaders of the mutinous spirit, their recalcitrant and resistant disposition being so well known aboard. Only one girl, Neat, escapes the brand of prostitute. She was tolerably well behaved, but ignorant and devoid of reflection. The rest are thus marked for their insolence. These women are the pest and gangrene of colonial society, a reproach to human nature, and lower than the brute, a disgrace to all animal existence. They will amount to nothing. Send me your approval post-haste. Yours, Cosgrave.
For our entire 6-month journey, including crossing the equator, the pest and gangrene of colonial society got 3 pints of water a day each. 3 pints for everything, drinking and washing and cooking. I kept the children cool by filling a barrel with seawater, and they played in there and they splashed about, and it meant they stayed cleanish. And the salt water healed any sores from bugs and gnats that were around, and there were plenty. Luckily, Francis, my sailor, helped us out and snuck some supplies down below for us. You see, I'd picked a good one for once. Finally, on a hot January day, we docked in Botany Bay. That sounds like a song. I watched as my friends left the ship, staggering down the gangplank, legs weak and unstable after months at sea, as well as severely malnourished. Some of them were taken straight to the hospital, and at last it was our turn. And I was hardly any better. I could hardly stand, and Francis helped me and the children down the gangplank. He bowed, and he briefly touched my hand, for the captain was watching from on deck, and Francis wanted to escape his ire. And then he turned, and he went back on board. And that was the last contact I had with the said Francis Mulligan. I expected to follow my friends, but was quickly disappointed, as a group of 56 of us were transshipped to the Duke of Wellington to be taken to our final destination, Hobart Town on the island called Van Diemen's Land. Now let me just say that if the Duke had seen the ship named after him, he would have not been impressed. A smaller hulk with the space below deck even smaller and more cramped, as well as foul-smelling. We were told the journey would be short, so there's no need to get settled. As if we would in those unclean surroundings. But delays meant it took 5 days. Well, my legs were still weak, and the children had to be carried by some of the paying passengers as we finally stepped ashore. Was I scared? Of course I was. But after a life of misery, and knowing that George Perkins was a long way away, I held my head up and stepped into this new chapter of my life and onto a green and verdant shore.
Dear Mum and Dad, well, I'm finally here. The crossing was long and testing. We was not treated the best. The men on board, they used and abused us. I just kept thinking, this won't last forever. We worked hard on the ship, fetching and carrying, scraping together bits of food where we could. I miss you both so much already. I hope you're both well. Please do not worry too much. I know getting here was rough, but I'm here, and I plan to make the most of it, make a life here, so I can support myself. Hoping once I'm settled, I'll be able to send stuff home for you both to help ease things for you. I'm sorry that I brought disgrace on our family. My promise to you is that I will repair our name and show my regret for what happened. So look on this not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. I will work hard and take every opportunity I can. I will keep my promise to you. I love you both so much. I will write again soon. All my love, always. Your loving daughter.
One thing you have to get used to below deck is pissing, shitting and puking in one bucket with barely enough water to wash your arse. Oddly enough, I actually feel sorry for the women who have to share the space with us, and I never thought I'd see that. Sometimes the slops spill and sometimes a crew member lends us a mop. Sometimes, when I'm allowed on deck, and the heavenly fresh air, and I could feel my lungs and nose working again, I collect a bit of seawater in a bucket, and I save that for washing my ass with a bit of sponge I kept hold of. I ration the fresh water for drinking, but occasionally I bribes the captain with one of my shillings for a tankard of beer. I always have to doze rather than sleep properly, in case someone pilfers, but I'm such a light sleeper anyway. I can help anyone who tries to slip an hand in one of my pockets, child, woman or man. I keeps a dagger on me, out of sight. Still, at least I'm not a pretty young woman who has to deal with a lot more than a few rummaging hands. When you're a middle-aged fat git like myself, people generally leave you alone. I count myself lucky, despite having to take this voyage. Of course, I pay the cheapest fare I could, so at least I have a hammock below deck to lie on, along with a couple of other men, and at least I'm not manacled or restricted in any way. But I have to sleep amongst and breathe in fetid farts. I know that society states that fathers aren't supposed to love and value their daughters as much as their sons, but I have to at least see how Lizzie's doing. I know she's a good girl at heart, and I want to tell her I'm not ashamed of her.
And I'd call it From Bristol to Botany Bay, if I had the time to write a book, which I don't. We lived in Bedminster. Oh, what a hellhole, with that creep next door listening with his glass to the wall. It's funny, though, to think he actually did me a favour by shopping us 35 years ago and getting me shipped out here. Because, you see, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And I'm not finished yet. Oh, no, not by a long chalk. Doing fine. Thank you very much. 3 husbands, 4 grown-up children, 5 grandchildren. Well, that was at the last count. And 2 shops, a pub, a brewery, and loads of land besides. Oh, and 6 houses, yeah. And, all earned by the sweat of my honest brow. Hey, do you like the coat? Well, you won't see another like this side of the Pacific Ocean, my dear. I wouldn't wear anything you can buy out here. You see, all my clothes come from London now. Shipped out? Oh, no, certainly not. Bought in person. We've been back twice. Last time first class. Came out in chains as a convict 35 years ago. All we girls did was, pass the stuff onto a fence. And we got longer sentences than the blokes that stole it. You've no idea what that journey was like and what we had to do to survive it. And I couldn't write a book about it because I managed to forget most of it. A prostitute and mutinous, the surgeon's report said when I landed. I remember Surgeon Cosgrave to my dying day. On the way home, last time, home is here now, by the way, we dined at the captain's table and, I asked him, did you know a Surgeon Cosgrave? Yes, he said. Still alive and living in Weymouth. So it's probably just as well we've got no plans to go back again because they're still transporting convicts and it would never do to be sent out here twice, would it? That's if they didn't hang me for murder, of course. Are you waiting to give evidence too? Well, it's my pub. Or it was, till the tenant let it burn down a fortnight after his insurance ran out. Do you know, this is my first court appearance since Bristol in 1816. And it feels very nice indeed to be on the other side of the dock. And on the other side of the world. sitting here. Brought it all back. Some of it, anyway. They sent me here in disgrace, but I will die here in triumph. Mrs. Cox? Oh, yeah, that's me. Yeah, of course I'm ready. Delighted. Very nice to meet you, my dear.
My dear Lizzie, I wanted to let you know where I've been today. The most beautiful place I've ever seen. You're my best friend always, and I just had to share with you the beauty and mystery of the splendid new mansion that I visited, owned by the very handsome Mr. Sumner. I was so nervous as I drove through the tall wrought iron gates and through a vast array of eucalyptus trees, like a large, dark, gloomy forest either side of the driveway. It felt like the forest didn't want me to leave, and actually I became quite fearful. And after a 5-minute drive, which felt more like an hour, I left the woodland behind me. And in front of me, well, it felt like I had entered paradise, left the darkness and entered into the light. All around me, luscious green grass and every flower and plant that God had created. The vibrancy of the colours and the fragrance of the Australian honeysuckle literally took my breath away. And in the distance, I could see the beautiful mansion with many welcoming windows shining as if they were eyes enlightened, and the large white door giving me the feeling that it was smiling, waiting to welcome me like a warm, loving uncle or a grandpa. We drew up outside, and I left the carriage and felt the gravel crunch beneath my feet. And there were birds singing all around me like a choir, and kookaburras laughing as if they knew I was coming and they had been prepared. And I could smell freshly cut grass and the sharp scent of eucalyptus, like rosemary or conifers in an English pine forest. Everything was so enchanting, and I felt like a fairy tale princess about to meet my Prince Charming. They say here that Mr. Sumner's grandmother came out in chains as a convict. That can't be true, surely. Can it?